I just want to mention something that happened at the Oscars, which was where Liz Banks came up to the presenter's podium with Koki, with someone in a bear suit, and actually spent a lot of time on stage praising the visual effects team while she was presenting the visual effects Oscar. Liz Banks had also done that constantly on social media and in interviews.
Yeah.
And I felt like she was just really respectful of the process.
Yeah.
If there's any other kind of criticism of bad CG and the too CG-ness of these films, Liz Banks was not part of that at all. And I'm so glad that she was like that. The only weird bit was that then when Weta won for Avatar, The Way of Water, they kind of got played off just like other visual effects visual effects winners have previously. And so you could argue that Liz Banks's long section, not that it was her fault, took away the time from the VFX crew, which is a bit of a bummer.
But it was fascinating to see it. Yeah, it was fascinating to see it still. I thought it was better.
The appreciation of VFX was the cool bit.
Yeah. This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtx. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got ftrack Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with cineSync and ftrack Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconik, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
Hi, Hugo. Hi, everybody. Welcome to VFX Notes. How are you, Hugo?
I'm very good. How you doing, man?
Hugo, today we're talking about Cocaine Bear. This film blew me away. I just think it's so cool. I can't wait for us to talk about it. But first, just want to say thank you so much to our Patreons. Hugo, our Patreons seriously are the best, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we couldn't do it without all of you. Thank you so much for all the support. Every month, there's always so many of you supporting us. It's overwhelming. I'm always so shocked when I look at the credit list.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Cocaine Bear. I think we should really just jump into our review of the film, Hugo, because I have to say one quick thing about this film. The trailers and the promotional material, I mean, look, I was kind of trying to avoid too many spoilers for this film, but clearly they were going for the 80s retro angle. And also, they kind of had pitched it as a bit of a bear attacks hikers, or a bear attacks, all these different people. What I loved about this film was it wasn't really like that at all. It was lots of different vignettes of different characters, some of whom come together at the end or during. It was actually, what I'm getting at is it was a completely different kind of film than I thought it was going in. What about you? What was your reaction to that side of it?
I mean... when I first, I'll tell you a little story. When I first heard of this film, it was like a long time ago, like a really long time ago. I saw a trailer. I don't even remember. I was watching a film for the VFX Notes podcast, and on the middle of all the trailers, this thing showed up. And I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was maybe a joke, or I thought maybe it was a commercial. I had no idea what it was. And I couldn't believe what I was watching, like a cocaine bear. I thought it was just the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. And then it kind of went away, for me at least. I wasn't really aware of it that much. And I think it was like a couple of weeks or maybe even a month until I even heard it again for the film. And the first reaction I had was that it was just one of these silly movies that I will never go and watch, that would never take my attention, because you know me, like, I'm a vegetarian, I love animals. When I first saw the trailer, I thought, oh man, they're gonna joke with bears, they're probably gonna mistreat them. I don't know, I just had a negative reaction right away. just because whenever there's animals on films, I'm always a bit unsure, and I'm always, it always it's always very difficult for me to watch animals on films. But man, then when I went and saw the film, because I think I saw it after you told me, like you went to see it, and then you said it was really funny. And then, of course, I discovered, at the time I didn't even notice, discovered that it was directed by Elizabeth Banks, which I'm really a big fan of. I mean, she's great, and she has so much
Yeah,
good work.
she's so cool.
She's so cool and so funny. And then I go and see it, and this is like the biggest acid trip I've had in a long time on a cinema. This is literally a bonkers movie. I don't think I've laughed almost the entire film, especially especially the scene with the ambulance. Like, I think I was almost choking laughing so much. I was laughing so much at that entire section. Seriously, you know when you laugh and your stomach aches, you know that? Like when you're laughing for so long that you even have pain on your maxilla, and you have pain in your stomach. That's how much I was in pain while I was watching parts of this film, and I could not believe what I was watching.
Yeah, that scene is a crowd pleaser, and that is what this film was, like a Friday night,
Yeah.
Like not horror film, because of course it has horror-y stuff, but a Friday night jump around and scream with the audience kind of film. I think what's really interesting is that it's a bonkers film with heart. You really actually end up feeling for the mother and her daughter,
Yeah.
and the different relationships here, even the drugsters. You sort of feel for them, and of course you feel for the bear and
Yeah.
her cubs. What I think is really interesting, I listened to a podcast with the screenwriter and the person who basically wrote this, I think, on spec, was that his pitch script included the kids doing cocaine as the first scene in the movie, right? So I think that's what got studios and Elizabeth Banks's attention is, whoa, that's a huge, crazy thing to put in at the beginning of a film. Now, when they came to actually make the film, they thought maybe that's too much and we need a bit of the setup story, which is, of course, a real story.
Yeah.
Or based on a real story of cocaine being dropped out of an airplane and the bear finding it. But that, to me, is really interesting to hear that backstory of that was the original script. That's how wacko it was. And it's wacko in the film. These kids trying cocaine. I mean, that seems terrible, but it totally works as a satirical, crazy thing in the film.
But it's
right?
it's quite subtle. Like I wrote some notes while I was watching the movie. That was my first note. Or kids eating cocaine. That's my first note, because you kind of like see, oh, they tried it, but she doesn't linger too much on that, I guess. But you're right. You're actually right. The film is actually quite deep sometimes. Not always, of course. Sometimes it's just completely bonkers.
No, not always.
Makes no sense at all. So the film is really like, I wouldn't say it's uneven, but the film is like really different in certain parts of the film. But you're right, like it is quite a heartfelt story, and quite interesting, the whole plot with the father and Ray Liotta's character as well, and the whole thing with the gangsters trying to, and also the police officer that is on that roof. The characters are really strong, actually. The characters are actually really funny, and they have a bit of a backstory. You feel that backstory on the film. I mean, I guess it would have been nice if it was a bit deeper, but I don't think it would be able to be this deep. Like, I mean, this is a cocaine, like it's a bear having cocaine. So you can't really go much more than that. I believe this was also sorry.
I was only going to say that's also one of the things that works in the film, isn't it? Is the concept is super obvious.
Yeah.
The bear finds the cocaine and eats it and goes crazy. That whenever there's a film that can be broken down to something super simple like that, I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you don't have to bring your brain along.
Yeah.
The fact that it had heart and, quite a bit of meaning is a really just added bonus.
It is. And I wish, I mean, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I wish the film would have I wish the film did better. I'm hoping that it has a second life on video, and I'm kind of expecting this to become a cult movie. To be honest, like I mean, come on, it will be a cult movie. I think on VOD and on DVD and on Blu-ray. I think it. You know, they're really
and
like
VHS.
I wish they made a VHS. I would have bought it and play it on
Yeah,
my
I know.
VHS.
They totally should.
They should have made
totally
it,
should.
or at least they should like make a package that looked like a VHS. There's a couple of HMV here in London does that quite a few times, but I wish the film did better at the time. The film, of course, was profitable. The film was quite cheap, and it ended up doing almost. I think it made close to 100 million, I believe, close to 100 million from a budget of 30. So at least it paid off. I'm glad to hear that. I'm always concerned when they do badly, then they just disappear. You know, that the studios don't greenlight crazy ideas. So I'm happy to see that Elizabeth Banks got at least the money back and some profit, because I'm sure it will help her to greenlight the next one. Because I find these films fascinating. I find these kind of films really bonkers, but they inspire other filmmakers and inspire other productions to happen. And let's be honest, Ian, like, isn't this film absolutely impossible to happen 20 years ago? That's the funny thing about this, is that this film, we're going to talk about the VFX soon. We still have more stuff to talk before that, but the VFX on this film is outstanding. And I think this is just a testament to the evolution that we had these days. You know, like, we are reaching a point where even a relatively small film of 30 million can have like AAA movie excellent VFX on them.
Oh, I see.
You know, like, this film has a photoreal bear that was done by Weta.
Yeah.
It looks just as good as any Marvel movie. It looks as good as any other. The Revenant looks as good as any other film that you've seen. But it's it's the time that we live on, where the visual effects has dropped in price, and the tools are much more affordable, and everything is a bit off the shelf now, and you have a lot more artists, a lot more companies, a lot more democratization. We are not in the time anymore that we just had ILM, you know, like, we have now thousands of VFX companies. And I think a film like this would be impossible in the 90s or in the 2000s. And I find this refreshing and fascinating, you know.
I mean, you're right. It's a film made possible by a CG bear. If it had been made 25 years ago, they probably would have tried to film with a real bear and composited it in. I mean, there are films like that. I think one is literally called The Bear. Or it would be a bear suit. And bear suits can actually look really good, but they also look cheesy.
Yeah.
And it looks like a man in a suit, you know. We'll totally talk about the visual effects in a minute. I'm going to say I think Weta did an amazing job. There's a part of the performance where, because she is going crazy, I didn't think it always felt completely realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bear that is on cocaine, sure. And I think we're getting into an interesting territory here, which we could talk about in terms of like Lion King, the dog in Guardians Volume 3, where the mixture of stylized performance versus absolute realism is a really hard thing for visual effects artists to walk the line on. But let's talk about that later, because I might actually be semi-controversial in what I say about the bear performance here, even though I think WetaFX's work is incredible. But
I think it is.
Speaking of bears, speaking of bears, we cannot talk about this film without referencing the most amazing film that had a bear before this, which was The Revenant. Hugo, what did you think about The Revenant when you watched that 5 times a couple of years ago?
Okay, so I knew you were gonna pull this off on me. Like, I have never seen The Revenant. Okay.
So, oh my god. What?
Okay. I know. Okay, let's take it easy. I bought the 4K Blu-ray at the time. I didn't manage to go to the cinema. I don't know why. I didn't go to the cinema to watch it. I have no idea. Can't remember why, because I should have went. I'm a fan of that director, fan of the DOP. I should have went to see it. Even a fan of Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know why I didn't go and see it. And then as soon as it was out, the 4K Blu-ray, man, I bought it the first day. I bought it full price on Amazon, the 4K Blu-ray. And it's just been sitting on my shelf. It's still wrapped on plastic. I don't know what happened. I have not
Oh my
watched this
God.
film yet. The funny thing, Ian, is that I was a judge, as like I always am every year. I'm a judge at the Visual Effects Society, and I watched all the behind the scenes of the film, and I watched when it went for the Visual Effects Society awards. And so I've seen the breakdowns. I've actually seen breakdowns that are not even public. I've seen breakdowns of the film. Looks stunning, looks amazing. So of course the film is very spoiled for me because I have seen that part only, never seen the rest of the film. But yeah, I guess I need to see the film. Yeah, sorry, Ian. Sorry.
There,
I guess we'll need to do an
there
episode
is
about the film, right? Like we'll need to do an episode about the film.
well, just the bear sequence, basically. I
Yeah,
mean, there is something about the way that was filmed with Leonardo DiCaprio, a stunt performer, and almost effectively doing it as a one-er,
yeah,
that bear sequence, which makes it off the charts good and compelling and hard to watch. And then ILM's work on that bear is also off the charts good.
yeah,
And it includes all the digital makeup on Leo and on the bear and the scrub and, forest mess that is made in this fight scene, really, with the bear. I mean, it still holds up as some of the best digital bear work I've ever seen.
yeah,
It's just incredible. And so Cocaine Bear was never going to be like that, right? It never needed to be totally realistic. But of course, Weta has the capacity to do it. They've done furry creatures so much in the Apes films. They've even done a CG bear for one of the Wolverine films. I
yeah.
think it was the bad Wolverine film. So they obviously Weta knows what they're doing. But just back to Revenant and maybe some other bear work. I mean, I just think, it's a hard act to follow because you say you're going to do a CG bear, everyone turns to the Revenant. So that can be tricky for a company, actually.
Yeah.
And there's actually lots of other great CG bear work. We don't have to go through all of it. I did a list the other day on Twitter and someone said, you left out Paddington. And I'm like, yeah, but Paddington's not like a grizzly bear or something like
It's not
that.
supposed to be a realistic bear. Like, no, I promise that I'll watch the film as soon as possible, and we should actually do a podcast because I love that director and I love the DOP as well. The footage that I've seen looks stunning as well, not just the bear sequence, but the rest of the film as well. And I'll watch it on my projector, like if it was on the movies, on cinema, on 4K. I'm sure I'll have a blast. I need to watch it. No, I'll promise. I promise I'll watch it.
There's a bunch of polar bears that Framestore has done for actually two his Dark Materials different projects
Yeah.
that are equally as fantastic. And
Yeah.
so again, it's hard for Weta, I think, to match some of the amazing bears that have come before it.
Yeah.
I think they did an amazing job. And we will get to talking about that work. But definitely it's a bit like when a company has to do a tsunami or, some sort of huge battle sequence. They're always going to be compared to what's come before.
Yeah.
And I think with the bear and Cocaine Bear, they were compared to it, but they could take it to a different level, which is a crazy cocaine sniffing, snorting performance.
But yeah, so Ian, have you lost all respect by me now? Because I haven't watched The Revenant yet. Is that what's happening now?
Well, if people knew what major films I had not seen, Hugo, they would probably lose a lot of respect for me. So I'm not going to admit the ones I haven't seen. No, I don't think that at all. I'll tell you a quick Revenant story really quickly. I saw it, put my hands over my head for the bear sequence, over my eyes for the bear sequence. So actually, in some ways, I missed a lot of it. And then one time I was walking past the cinema and I knew we had an interview with ILM to do for The Revenant. So I bought a ticket to see it and I went in and just watched the bear sequence and then left The Revenant.
Oh my God.
So I've seen the film twice, sort of.
Oh
And
my
yeah,
God.
and then of course we saw the VES breakdowns. And then the other quick Revenant story is that we were never allowed to publish that story about the CG bear because the director wanted to keep it, behind the curtain as to how it was made.
Well, isn't
But
it
anyway,
interesting
that's
that the Visual Effects Society breakdown never came out? That one never came out, which is really impressive.
I mean, that's happened.
It's a really impressive breakdown. Like, it's fascinating how good it is. But it never came out. Like, and it's been years, which is fascinating. Also, the film is so old now.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time on the podcast. Why don't they just let it happen? I mean, it's been so long now. Who cares? They can show the bear now. Like, the film has made the money, the DVD has made the money, the Blu-ray has made the money. No one cares anymore. Like, let's just show it. Like, I just don't really understand that. Really pisses me off.
Oh well, that could be a whole other show.
I know.
I think interestingly, the procedure of performing that stunt sequence in Revenant probably led to the way of filming it here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Hugo, in terms of the stunt work and stand-in.
Yeah.
How did they film Koki, as the bear became known?
So funny, the name, isn't it? Like Koki. It's just so funny.
Great name.
Here he is. Here he is. So yeah. So if anyone has the opportunity, you should go and read Ian's article on Before and Afters, and also fascinating interview as well with the previous team. But we'll talk the PostViz. Sorry, even I did the mistake. You see,
PostViz.
The PostViz, the PostViz. But everyone should go and see it because it's a really good interview, a really good article about the visual effects done by Weta, which has these amazing, hilarious pieces of footage that you have here, which is really cool.
Yeah, so basically, just like any film that needs a creature, they'd had a stuffy on set that was made by Weta Workshop. And I mean, that stuffy just right there on screen at the moment is so realistic, isn't it? Just incredible. And that just helps the actors and the crew and the director understand what the bear would look like on screen, but also lighting interaction, things like shadows. I think it's also helpful for the actors to come up and touch it and just sort of relate to the bear a little bit.
Yeah.
So a stuffy head, always a great way to get the actors involved and, basically be a lighting bust that WetaFX would later use when they create their CG bear. But then the other big side of it, Hugo, is a stand-in performer. Effectively a stunt person. And what was kind of cool was that because of the lockdown, I believe the stunt performer had a lot of time in New Zealand with Weta to basically come up with bear movements and work out what he should wear and not wear. Here, it's like a funny head HMC, which has the bear nose and some eyes. Again, just for the actors to have interaction, but there are also like a bulked up suit. Also there you've got the arm extensions, very much from the Apes days. I'm not sure if you've got a picture of him as in his sort of bulked up bear black suit.
Yeah, it's coming up next.
I think, Hugo, what's kind of interesting about this is that they didn't really go for motion capture, which I guess was never going to translate to a real bear.
No,
or from a human to a real bear.
No, I think the stylization. This is the image you were talking about, right? Like this
that's a photogrammetry scan.
Yeah, but I think I have a piece of footage of him on the set, which is the next one. It's this one here, of him actually on the set side by side. This is actually from Weta's website.
Oh, nice.
So this is from Weta's. It has a really strange filter on top, but it's from Weta's homepage. So the funny thing with this is that I really understand why I didn't go to actual have full motion capture on this, because it's such a stylized thing. I mean, how the hell do you do a bear doing cocaine? This would always have to be hand animated. There's no other way really to do something like this. It's not only it's really stylized, but also it's a bit cartoonish sometimes. I mean, come on, when the bear is like looking at the butterfly and he's like looking around stoned and like completely coked out of his mind, that has to be hand animation, and they have to use reference from humans and trying to get a humanistic side to the bear. That is what's fascinating about this film. I think the animation is on point. It's beautiful. It's really good. Of course, it's completely fake. It's completely like over exaggerated and animated, but that's the whole point. It's like such a nice stylized thing. So I think I love that fact. I love that it's hand animated and it's not really. It's a bit. It feels a bit old fashioned, but it really was the perfect pick for something like this.
Yeah. But of course, what helps Weta FX and the filmmakers as they're making the film is to have someone on set. In this case, it was a performer called Alan Henry, who's a local NZ stunt actor. And, it's never going to be the final performance. But, when the character is down on the ground and the bear lays on him, it just helps to have something to show the interaction, the movement, and to give the actor something to play against. I also felt like they have moved away, from using like green leotard or blue leotard. Black was obviously because the bear is black.
Yeah.
But, Weta and other visual effects companies do such a great job in roto and match moving and clean plating that we don't really necessarily need the green or blue leotard approach anymore.
No, and in fact, it's funny that you say that. Well, that's actually featured on your interview, but it would have been a huge problem if it was green. Like, actually, it would have been a huge problem because you have. Well, first of all, it couldn't be green because it's greenery. It's all like a forest, so green would have been a huge problem to try to detect the edges. But also, even if you had a blue leotard, if you had one of those, yes, you would have a good edge, and yes, you could have rotoscoped and keyed and comped the vegetation in front, but then you would have all the spill of blue everywhere. And then on the moments where you would have maybe the unfortunate, of the actual bear not covering the entire performer of the blue suit, then you would have to paint everything. In this case, by doing it black, it's really smart because if something is failed, if by some chance you still see the performer behind it, or if you still have a little hint or a little patch that was not covered, doesn't matter. It's black on black. No one will notice. It's very forgiving. Not saying that they left parts of it there. I'm sure the Weta team did an incredible job on comp and paint, but it makes it easier because then instead of doing... In some situations, as a composer, I can speak that from experience. On some situations, instead of you having to paint the whole thing and actually do proper patching, you can get away with a soft mask and some grading, because you can grade it down because it's black. You can make it a bit darker. You can add some grain on top and it merges into the plate. So kind of looks like the fur. So if you put grain, if you grade it a little bit, it probably looks like fur, and then it can be merged in top of the CG. So it was really smart to do black on black. I feel like, and I'm sure Elizabeth Blanks was like really surprised because she was probably expecting the green leotard guy to show up, and then I'm sure she was disappointed.
Yeah. I will say this: that you mentioned that it's a relatively low budget film. When I was watching it, I actually noticed that there wasn't a huge amount of bear and forest, plants, grass interaction. I mean, there is plenty, and Weta has done an awesome job in making that possible with simulations. But I do feel like where they filmed this in Northern Ireland and also in New Zealand, I think it was Northern Ireland, they basically purposely didn't make the bear. I mean, there's certainly a scene that goes through some ferns, just to prove me wrong there. Thanks, Hugo.
No. I'm just putting the scene because
no. But
making a note because this was the most difficult scene apparently of the shot. That's why it was. It proves your point.
And I think
because there's very few of these.
Yeah, I think in general they just avoided all of that, which they didn't avoid ever with the Apes films, because that was just part of the filmmaking, and so it probably saved them a lot of money, time, by not having to deal so much with that plant interaction, which is a thing that always happens with digital characters.
You can see it here on your. You can see here on your frame. if you look closely on your frame, you notice that the edge of the flowers that are in front of the bear are actually chewed up, and actually the edge and the rotoscoping is not very good at all. But it doesn't matter because it's black on black, so no one ever will notice it.
Sure.
So normally, if you had the guy on blue on green, this would have to be perfectly rotoscoped. And on this situation, it didn't. You can kind of see that the edges of the flower there are a bit chewed up. And in fact, there's even a section here on the bottom of the bear that is actually missing from the original plate. So on the plate, there was some greenery there, and they took it out to put the bear. This is what your interview, sorry, I forgot his name, the VFX soup, what was his name? Sorry.
Is Robin Hollander.
Yeah, Robin. Yeah. That's what Robin was saying on the interview, like, you can get away with a few things. I'm not saying that it was done on purpose, it's just that it just becomes easier. And, can tell you this, man, from experience, a compositor, if he can get away with it, he will get away with it. So that's what happened here.
I mean, the thing to remember is Robin Hollander is a gun compositor, or came up the ranks, I think, as a gun compositor at Weta. I told him during the interview, actually, there's a video he made about the first Apes film where Weta was really getting into deep compositing, and he made here's what deep compositing is. And occasionally, Hugo, I feel like I've forgotten how to think about deep compositing, and I go back to that old Foundry Nuke video that Robin made to understand why they even use it. And it's obviously just become part of the workflow there and at other institutions. So yes, I deliberately know or I deliberately remembered that Robin is really known so well for compositing. So anyway, they did do a good job.
Yeah, they did an incredible job. Like, I feel like I know we already talking about the VFX. We kind of skipped the PostViz, but we can. We're gonna jump a bit. I'm sure, but it is. I think I know what you've meant on the beginning. There's some moments on the film that I don't think it's the compositing of the CG that lets you down. It's the uncanny valley of what the hell is happening. I think that's the issue. I mean, it's a bear on cocaine. Yeah. Like, you're like, what the hell am I watching? And of course, your brain can't process it. Like, I think it's more about that. When you watch these clips, of him just completely losing his mind in cocaine and watching the butterfly, this is. Obviously, your brain is going to look at this. Oh, this is fake. Of course, it's fake because this doesn't happen. So I think it's not it's not bad work that they made. I think it's just your brain is like, what am I watching?
Yes.
I feel the work is perfect. Like, the work is very good. Like, I think this is,
the work is outstanding.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. Your brain, and what I mean by that is, as I said, there's the film that just came out, Guardians Volume 3. There's a CG dog in it, Cosmo. He's a CG dog in a spacesuit, and it's done by Framestore. But what happens is, it always looks and acts like a real dog. Like, there's no lip sync or anything like that, because it communicates with a communicator around its neck. And I think that's what they went for, was like a real dog.
Yeah.
Here, they clearly look to reference of real bears and sun bears and grizzly bears, and there are moments where it just feels like a real bear.
Yeah.
But then, as it's going crazier with cocaine, I feel like they had to add some kind of high frequency movement, and of course the cocaine on its head and mouth.
Yeah.
And they had to do things that were a mad bear.
Yeah.
And not that I know bears intimately or anything, Hugo, but
Dr. Ian Fales, specialist on bears.
Yes, I've got my PhD in bears. I just mean that there were some moments where you're like, oh, that's just a movie moment bear, rather than a real bear. And I'm just saying that is exactly what Elizabeth was aiming for.
Yeah.
So there's no problem at all. It just took me out a little bit, is really what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's always going to happen. It's always the same way that it's the same. I'm glad you've mentioned the Guardians of the Galaxy rocket, for example. He's
Mm.
completely stylized. I mean, it doesn't look like a raccoon. It doesn't look like a person. He's like a mixed. Is like a cartoonish version of a raccoon mixed with a cybernetic human of some kind. And but because he's so well acted and there's so much story behind it, and you love the story, and you've been watching it for so long, you have now you believe in him because he's a character of that story and he talks a lot. And I think in this case, the bear doesn't
Yeah.
talk. We have never seen him before. There's no other films. Like, it's only once that we see him. It's going to be a bit difficult to sell this thing because
Yeah.
you're. I imagine if this bear would now do a sequel and a third film, and it would start talking, just like Paddington. When you look at Paddington, he's talking, and you don't ever consider, oh, this is fake, he's talking, because he's talking and he's telling you a story, and he's funny and he's cute, and so you go along with the ride. This is more tricky, I think, because this bear is supposed to be real, but then is in cocaine. But because and no one has ever seen a bear in cocaine, what reference do we have? We have no
Yeah.
reference.
Well, that's what, yeah, Jose is mentioning that. Like, is there reference? I'm sure that in my article, Robin mentions some crazy, terrible reference of a bear attacking either people or other animals that they, of course, had to use. But but Hugo, just in terms of the realism and believability, actually, Robin Hollander mentions that specifically in the article. I might read it out because I thought it was really honest way of describing one of the challenges they had in getting the photorealism. He says the low frequency jiggle and the high frequency close up detail. With that, we found the nature black fur made it quite easy to over-absorb all of the performance. So quite often we would see in the animation puppet or the skin render a performance that we needed, but by the
Mhm.
time we actually lit and rendered the creature solve, it was like, oh, we lost it because the underlying fat and fascia layer just doled everything out. And that was a problem. That was a challenge they had on this film because of that sheen as well that the black bear has. You didn't always sometimes get the detail, and then we could talk about black getting lost in forest images as well. We always talk about crushing the blacks and
Yeah, yeah.
losing the detail. I would have to say that occasionally happened on the cinema screen that I was watching. I would be really interested in seeing this in HD on a TV, and I
On a
think it would
Blu-ray.
actually play a lot better. Having said that, Weta found ways to get over that problem, in compositing and lighting, and possibly making the bear not, like they have onset lighting and they have an approach that they always use on these films. I wonder whether sometimes they went the other way because they really needed to show the detail.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think you're right. I think actually you're right. Like, when you watch it on the cinema, for example, the film is really detailed, and watching it on a very, very big screen actually doesn't help much because you have a lot of grain as well on the whole thing, and then you have all the micro detail and all the dirt on the bear, and then you have the dust, and then you have the cocaine, of course.
Mm.
And I can't believe we're saying cocaine so many times. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I saw that really clearly. I was quite in the front, actually, watching. I always like to see films really close
Mm.
by, close to screen. So I was on the third row, and it did take me off sometimes because the grain and the fuzziness of the hair and all that detail was sometimes a bit too much for me. But I definitely want to see it in Blu-ray because I think this is going to transition beautifully to video. I think on streaming,
Absolutely.
on
Yeah.
Blu-ray, like I said, I think this is going to become like a cult hit in video for sure. Like this film,
Yeah.
and because it's so funny. And I haven't seen the Blu-ray yet, but apparently there's like a lot of gags, and there's like gag reels and behind the scenes, and there's a ton of extra clips that they've put in. It's called the extra edition. Whatever. It's like, I think it has like a really silly name as well. I need to buy it and watch it because it should be quite a laugh to watch it.
Yeah. By the way, there's a clip you were showing before of Koki dragging the bag that had, the red bag that had the cocaine in it. I feel like the internet went ballistic in a good way over just that bag simulation that WetaFX did.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just outstanding work that people probably maybe thought a stunt performer was pulling that bag
It's very
along and Weta was
realistic.
match
Yeah.
animating to it.
It's very
I mean, of
realistic.
course, Weta would simulate the bag and just did incredible job
Of
with it.
course they did.
So, it just goes to show people really don't know what's real and unreal in these big movies anymore.
No. um I don't know if you want to move on, but I want to, like, if you don't mind, I would love to, like, talk a little bit about how they shot this in terms of thinking of VFX to shoot it, because I thought it was fascinating. I love the interview. Like I said, everyone should go and read it on Before and Afters. I'm not plugging the show. I'm just saying the interview is really good. Go and see it. Go and read it. But I'm also plugging it as well. So you should go and read it because you go in a lot of detail of how this was filmed. Normally, that's not the case. Normally we don't know about how this was actually filmed in terms of how many passes and how many plates they had to shoot. I mean, I know how this happens because I've been on set and I pretty much work like him as well. I do this kind of gun blazing Spanish motion control method, where we just like shoot things and hope for the best. I work a lot like that on my projects because of my commercial background. And I thought it was fascinating, this idea of, obviously they always shoot on every take. There's the bear. They always shoot, of course, the performance with the guy with the suit. That's perfectly normal. They shoot a clean plate, which is perfectly normal as well. And then they shoot the utility ball, like the spheres, the HDRs, the charts, which is completely normal. All of this with a moving camera or sometimes on sticks. Obviously, they would have to then match move them and merge them. That's absolutely fine. Not a very big deal. There's not a lot of really complex moves on the shots anyway. The camera is most of the time quite static, which I think it plays into the film because you want to watch the bear. You don't want to have crazy movements anyway. But I love this extra thing that they did, which was with the styrofoam boards, with the blue styrofoam boards. This was fascinating. This styroboard board that they would use to do a plate, and even if the camera wasn't matching completely, it didn't matter, that they would go with the styroboard board. I wish I had footage for it. I don't have that, but they would go with the styrofoam board and walk through the same path where the bear was supposed to be, so that they could have a separation of foreground, background, and middle ground for the grass and for the leaves and for the trees as well. This is a really smart idea because although the plates don't match, you could always nudge them and use them as patches to comp them, because on that moment when you finish shooting the take, the lighting is there. And so if you go ahead and use this styrofoam board with blue and film it as a pass to cut to effectively have a Z-slice of the grass and all the trees, you'll shoot them. If you shoot them right away after the performance, you'll have an exact match of the lighting and the time of day that when they shot the performance. And it's a lot easier to then match. Then the opposite, which would be for later on after the shoot is done, they would go back to the set and then photograph and do some plates. Maybe the sun would have moved. Maybe it was cloudy by then. Nothing would match again. I thought this was fascinating. It was a great trick, which I'm going to steal and use on my next project for sure. And I thought it was a fantastic trick. And I love that you got this on record because it's so rare for us to ever know how anything is done. and I thought this was really, really fascinating, this trick.
Again, I think it's Robin Hollander's compositing background that is part of this, and maybe it's something WetaFX do every time. The extra little nuance on it, Hugo, is about the position of the performer in the plate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially moving through a scene, as you say, a Z slice.
Yeah.
Because they can
don't have
clearly
anything that looks like that, but
they can clearly. Yeah. I think in some other films, where they're using a mocap actor in the Apes films, they have a lot more reference cameras, try to help triangulate the performance. And plus, They've got, onset performance capture, motion capture data. Here, what Robin's talking about is, okay, if the actor, standing in for the bear is moving through some bushes or moving from back of the frame to the front of the frame, that blue screen pass with those styrofoam boards is about working out where the character was in the
Yeah,
frame.
yeah, absolutely.
Not just about being able to composite them amongst the bushes or whatever.
Yeah,
Yes, you're right. I think that was really
and
cool. And I never get VFX soups to talk about that stage of
I
the
know, because
production.
we are not allowed to. That's the issue usually.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that he
Mm.
did. But it's also fascinating because I feel like sometimes compositors and VFX supervisors get too attached to this idea that, oh, the camera's moved, we can't do anything anymore. And I've never been like that. When I'm supervising on set, I don't care if the camera even moved a few inches or even if it moved a few centimeters or maybe if they moved a little bit. It doesn't matter. Even if the camera's moved a little bit, it's still roughly the same angle and it's still roughly the same thing and the lighting is there. That's the main thing. Because for you
Yeah.
to rotoscope a bunch of grass that you have to put on the foreground of the bear, for example, for you to rotoscope a bunch of the grass, isn't it better to rotoscope a piece of grass that matches the lighting, even if it's not the exact angle, but you can nudge it and kind of warp it into place, than actually using a piece of grass that was photographed the next day by the B camera on another time of day, and then you have to spend hours trying to massage it into the plate and to merge it into compositing. So this is, I would advise to everyone that is listening, any VFX soup, any up-and-coming compositor, any compositor that is listening to this show, doesn't matter if the camera's moved, just take the shot. Film anything. It doesn't matter what it is, film it anyway. You can always stitch it back together. You can 3D track it and patch it. You can do what we call a Spanish motion control, which is to do a motion control by hand. It doesn't matter. Like, it's always better. And this is a great idea. Like, I feel like, yeah, you're gonna see me using it at some point. You'll see it.
That's great. And just before we round out some of the discussion about the CG Bear, a really quick mention of Halon Entertainment's work in post-vising
Yeah.
some sequences from the film. They didn't work on the previs. I'm not sure if there was any elaborate previs. But Halon did some really great post-vis. When they sent me some images of this, what I couldn't believe was the quality of their bear.
I
And,
know.
always think of previs or post-vis as like just shapes in Maya or,
Well, you fooled me.
something a bit
When you
simple.
sent me this, you fooled me,
Yeah.
because you sent me this, and I actually thought these were plates from
Mm,
the film. When I looked at
mm,
this, I thought, oh yeah, okay, you're like
yeah.
Ian sent me another frame, and then I understood when I listened to the podcast. Oh my God, that's a
Yeah. I,
previs Unreal render of it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
insane.
that's where we're at with these Unreal renders that Halon and other visualization companies are doing. I think they really stepped up to the plate more with CG furry previs and postvis on a film called Call of the Wild that had a dog. And then, they now have this ability to do that sort of fur rendering and getting the lighting and the sheen of the bear so perfect. So that's a fun podcast on befores and afters, another plug there, where we go into the detail about what you actually do for post-viz and why we're doing it at all. And it's to, of course, help Liz Banks and her editor um, manufacture scenes, so that the studio can see it, so that they can work out how
And
it's going to
look
look in the
at it,
final
like
film. And then,
this looks as bad,
yeah,
like
amazing.
this looks almost as good as some films I've seen. Like, I feel like this must have been an amazing tool for Liz Banks, for Elizabeth Banks, and for the DOP and for everyone involved on the film to really block shots. Oh my God, like they actually could
Yeah,
block properly everything. And as a matter of fact, when you listen to your podcast, it carried it to Weta. Like, the blocking was blocked there with the post viz, and they ended up matching it almost to a perfection to the final cameras and the final blocking that then we later on saw from Weta. It was fascinating. It's a fascinating podcast. It's quite
yeah.
short, which is a shame, but it's a really good record, a really good interview.
Yeah, I can't manage to do hour and a half long podcasts. You go
Only
only
with
here
me. Yeah,
on
only me.
VFX Notes.
That's because I talk too much. That's why.
Okay. I just want to mention something that happened this year at the Oscars, which was where Liz Banks came up to the presenter's podium with Koki, with someone in a bear suit, and actually spent a lot of time on stage praising the visual effects team while she was presenting the visual effects Oscar. Liz Banks had also done that constantly on social media and
Yeah,
in interviews.
yeah,
And I felt like she was just really respectful of the process.
yeah,
If there's any other kind of criticism of bad CG and the too CG-ness of these films, Liz Banks was not part of that at all. And
yeah.
I'm so glad that she was like that. The only weird bit was that then when Weta won for Avatar, The Way of Water, they kind of got played off just like other visual effects winners have previously. And so you could argue that Liz Banks's long section, not that it was her fault, like took away the time from the VFX crew, which is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah,
But
but it was
just
fascinating to
generally,
see it. Yeah, it was fascinating to see it still. I thought
yeah,
it was
the
better.
appreciation of VFX was the cool bit.
Yeah. No, it was. And you probably noticed, I don't know if, I'm sure you noticed, but she has retweeted all of your articles and she's retweeted every post about this film on visual effects. There was a phase during the promotion of the film she was retweeting before and afters. She was retweeting Weta. She was retweeting everyone and
Mm.
just praising the VFX to everyone. I thought it was fascinating, and I'm so happy to see like maybe this is like a new breed of directors that is a bit more informed. I'm not saying the other ones are not. Like, it's just like seems to me that she has been informed and she's seen how it can work, and it looks to me like that she understood how it worked. You can see that by listening to the VFX soup and listening to the PostViz soup as well. Like, you can clearly see that she although there was a lot of laughter and a lot of jokes while shooting this, she was very professional and really dealt with it really well. I
Mm.
thought that was great.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. She's my new bestie on social media, of course. So that's super cool. Yeah, and look, I mean, I think all directors, if they have a good experience and the visual effects team save their film. I don't mean that there's a problem with this one, but that basically it rests on a convincing performance from a digital character. Why wouldn't they be appreciative of the visual effects team who do tend to go above and beyond
Yeah,
what's required?
yeah,
What happens sometimes is you hear that things go off the rails just more in terms of cost and waiting for the visual effects to be finished. Very often not the fault of the visual effects studio, because they're getting things late or decisions have been changed or whatnot. But here clearly Liz Banks had a good time.
yeah. I know she did. Everyone involved had a good time. I can't wait to see what she does next, though. Like, because if you think about it, like, her career is just starting. I mean, this is just her third film. Pitch Perfect 2, which it's a great film. I love the Pitch Perfect franchise. But it's really,
Yeah,
really
same.
funny. And then Charlie's Angels was okay. I mean, I didn't really love it. I thought it was an okay film. I don't think it landed very well, and it wasn't received very well.
No.
I don't think the film is very good. I hope for best, but I think the source material would have been difficult anyway. Like that, I think Charlie's Angels is a bit forgotten, and maybe it's more about nostalgia than anything that she did this film. But with Cocaine Bear, third film, man, I can't wait for the next one. I mean, I think we have a comedy director in our hands, and I think she's gonna do a lot of cool stuff
Yeah.
in the
I
future.
mean, she's been around. Let's not.
No, I'm
She's a
talking about as
great
a
actress,
director. I'm talking
actor.
about.
Yeah,
I'm
of
only talking
course.
about as a
Yeah, yeah.
director. Yeah, yeah. I know. She's been
Mm,
around. I'm a big fan. She's been around as an actress forever, going
mm,
all the way back to like the 40-year-old version. I think that was the first time I saw her was on that film.
mm.
I think that's
In the
her.
bookshop.
Yeah, exactly. Like she was, and then on the hot tub sequence. Yeah, no, I think that was the first time I saw her. But as a director, she's really come, like she's been doing films every 3-4 years, so she's looks like she's wants to do a direction career from now on. I'm sure she'll still doing films as an actress as well, but I can't wait to see more. That's what I meant. I really can't wait to see more. Because if she can do
Yeah.
Cocaine Bear, do you imagine what she can do with a bigger budget and more crazy ideas? I mean, sky is the limit. If maybe she can do a really, really crazy, comic book film, like a really crazy one. That would have been nice.
Mm, mm. Let's hope so. Awesome. Well, Hugo, as we wrap this up, I can't thank everyone enough for tuning in, and also you yourself, Hugo, for making this possible. Thanks, Hugo. And I'm just gonna go and send some more pictures of me standing next to a bear, because that's what I seem to do when this film came out.
You have
I
quite a
just
lot, don't you?
had
You
these-
have quite a lot of pictures of this.
I don't know. I did that one. That was from a Nash Edgerton short film called Bear, and that was shot in the bush in Australia. And I just thought the bear suit, which was from VFX, was actually really cool. And then I got some good photos of it, so I've milked those forevermore. So,
Cool, man. Well, as always, it's always a pleasure. And thanks, everyone, for watching live. And also thanks to everyone that will watch this in VOD. And yeah, thanks for the support. And we'll catch you all later, I guess. Yeah.
thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.